Welcome to the Crawcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and this is what happened on Thursday Night Football, the Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions won 34-31. The Lions' leading passer was Jared Goff, who threw for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was David Montgomery, who had 51 rushing yards and a touchdown, and their leading receiver is Jameson Williams, who had 80 receiving yards. And for the Packers, their leading passer was Jordan Love, who had 206 passing yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Josh Jacobs, who had 66 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Christian Watson, who had 114 receiving yards. And so this was a really good game by both teams. Both teams really played well. It was really exciting because it kept going back and forth, and I was like, okay, who's going to be the first team to make a mistake and not score? And it just seemed to so happen to be the Packers. So I think I'm going to kind of take this video in the terms of like looking at both sides of the ball. For the game as a whole, I thought it was pretty good in the sense that it was kind of a reverse of halves. In the first half, Detroit felt really good, really on top of things, like they were going to win, and Green Bay really struggled in the first half, and then it felt like in the second half, the momentum completely shifted. In the second half, Green Bay got an interception off of Jared Goff. He threw a bad interception to Keyshawn Nixon. And then Green Bay kind of was up for a majority of the second half while they were going back and forth, and with Detroit overall making it. So a couple of key things. I know a lot of Packers fans are talking about the penalties, and yeah, there was quite a few penalties that didn't go in Green Bay's favor and should have been called. But I don't really think it's a good idea to just kind of complain and moan about the refs because, that's what you're supposed to do. Get more points so the refs don't matter. There's one call that really did bother me, though, that I will mention, is when the Packers settled for a field goal at the end there, and Jordan Love threw a touchdown to Josh Jacobs. There was a pick play on Christian Watson, and I just really didn't like that call because Christian Watson was running his route, and Kirby Joseph just kind of ran into him, and there was really nothing Christian Watson could do to avoid him. And I don't even think it was a pick play, to be honest with you, because looking at it, it looked like the play was supposed to go to the left to Jayden Reed, and then Jayden Reed kind of got tripped up and fell down, and so the whole play fell apart with Jordan Love running around and then throwing a touchdown to Josh Jacobs. So there's that, and then at the end with Dan Campbell going for it, where it was 4th and inches or 4th and 1. I can't remember. I think it was 4th and inches. And they could have kicked the game-winning field goal, but they wanted to drain more clock and not give Green Bay an opportunity, so they go for it on 4th and inches. Jared Goff falls down, and it still ends up being able to hand off to David Montgomery. I thought that was a really dumb decision. I'm going to be honest. I do not think it's worth it because Green Bay basically just need to get 30 yards to kick the game-winning field goal and win the game. And yes, it did end up working out for Detroit. But I just thought that was a really bad move. It almost didn't. Jared Goff almost fell down, and that really could have screwed him. Again, it ended up working, but I just thought that was a really bad, really dumb play call for Detroit. And then also going for it on their own 30. I understand at that point it looked like, hey, Green Bay's coming back, and we don't want Green Bay to score and be up 10 points against us. But it's your own 30. I thought that was a bad move. Like, if you're maybe in your 40 or 50, I'd agree with it. But it felt like going for it on your own 30 was a bad call just because, Green Bay is already in field goal range, and you're basically giving up a field goal. And I believe they were either tied or Detroit was up 3 at that point. And then when they were going for it on 4th down, like basically on the goal line, I thought that was a good move by Detroit because either you give the Packers the ball at the 1 and hope your defense can stop them, or you get a touchdown. So I thought those were good risky moves by Dan Campbell. And then the defense. I think both defenses are pretty injured. Although Detroit, I understand they have something like 13 players on IR. I don't think that's the end of the world for Detroit because basically a lot of those guys are backups, and you're really only your key injuries people on IR are Aiden Hutchinson, uh, Malcolm Rodriguez, and Alex Anzalone. Other than that, I feel like a lot of the guys are backups who aren't very good anyways, and you're basically just replacing them with the same equivalent players. Or a lot of them are on the D-line, and I do think that is kind of the easiest position to replace in the sense that you can bring your linebackers up, you can send a lot of blitzes, and you can have simulated pressure if your pass rush isn't necessarily getting home. And Green Bay, I think they really got the bad end of the stick here in the sense of injuries because because Green Bay, their secondary is just killed. They lost Javon Bullard, who was in a walking boot after the game, and who knows how long he's going to be out. They lost Evan Williams, who I believe had a concussion, so hopefully he won't be out too bad for the Packers. And then there were no Jair Alexander, no Corey Ballantyne, and just overall, though, I think the secondary is much harder to replace just because Eric Stokes was left on an island, and Eric Stokes is just not a very good player anymore. He had a decent rookie year, and then past that, he's just not very good to the point where I think he's even on the bubble of making a roster next year. He won't be re-signed by the Packers, but overall, I think both teams have to be very happy. If you're the Lions, you did make the playoffs, and that has to be a good feeling. You're on your way to the 1 seed. I think you'll probably get it. You have a relatively easy schedule in the sense that you still have to face Buffalo, which will be difficult, and then you still have to face Minnesota, which may be difficult. But then your other games are Chicago, who they should beat, and then they have San Francisco, who they should beat. And that's just one of those things where it will be a tough game for them, but they just need to fix on just keeping the same rhythm the entire game and not just collapsing towards the second half, especially on defense. And then for the Packers, you got to be happy because the Lions are probably the best team in the NFL with the best offense in the NFL. You shut down their rushing attack quite a bit and only let them average, I think, 3.3 yards per carry. And overall, you hung with them. You probably weren't going to beat them because their offense is that good. You did get pretty unlucky with injuries, and both these teams are going to be playoff teams. Like, this game kind of meant a lot more for the Lions, it felt like, than the Packers, because the Packers were probably never going to get the 1 seed. They're probably never going to win the division, and all they're hoping for is the playoffs, which they probably will make. And then Detroit, same thing. You're still fighting for the playoffs. You're still fighting for the 1 seed. I think they'll probably get it because I do think their schedule is decently easy, and I think they're probably the best team in football. Their defense is a little bit shaky at times and does give me some cause for concern, but their offense is so good that everything kind of works in tandem in the sense that if your offense goes in early, then that changes your opponent's strategy because they're kind of scared saying, okay, if we can't stop this offense, then we feel like we need to score every single time. So they might go for it in fourth downs where they shouldn't have, or they might try to pass the ball more in running situations. So overall, I think obviously you want the win, but I think you gotta be pretty happy if you're both teams the way this game ended up, and just overall, it was a great game. Both teams are great, and it'll be interesting if they meet each other in the playoffs, whether it's the divisional or the championship game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money, and I'll see you on the next one. And also, I just want to mention this about Penei Sewell. We are still on touchdown watch for Penei Sewell. I think he will eventually score his touchdown this year. He didn't get any opportunities this game, no handoffs, no carries, no opportunity for a pass. But when he eventually scores his touchdown, everyone is going to lose it. Think about last week against the Bears. He got sacked, and the crowd was cheering. It was probably the only time in NFL history where a crowd was freaking out cheering for a 3-yard loss. So I think, honestly, I think they got to get to the point where instead of having David Montgomery on the goal line, just give it to Penei Sewell. Put him at fullback, hand it off, make him like a little mini fridge, and like with William Perry, and just hand him the ball. He needs to get his touchdown this week, or not this week, but this season. It will happen. I think everyone's going to freak out and lose it, and it'll be very exciting when that happens.